Thank you for joining me for Cam Church. My name is Unicole Unicron, and it is my honor to have your attention. Today we're going to be talking about healing anxiety in relationships, and you might think, well, I don't have anxiety in relationships. Hang on, because I'm pretty sure you do. A lot of us do, almost all of us do, and it doesn't manifest the same way in each of us. So we're going to be looking at this through the lens of attachment styles, and this isn't a complicated topic, but it is very beneficial. And I think no matter who you are, no matter what kind of person you are, whether you identify as aromantic or asexual or a love addict or a sex addict or anything in between, I think that this information is really going to help you. As you all know, probably, I identify as a sex and love addict. I entered the program of SLAA back in 2020, in September of 2020, and it changed my life. And I feel so good about how I show up in relationships now. I feel steady, I have secure attachment, and I can approach relationships with low anxiety. I can set boundaries easily now with people who are not meeting my needs, and I am a better communicator, a better lover, a better friend, a better family member. It's unbelievable what this work has done for me in my life. And so that's why I spend a lot of time talking about it, because there's so much here that can really directly benefit you if you think about it in the right way. SLAA is an amazing program, but some of the concepts in it are a little bit limited. It's coming from Alcoholics Anonymous, it's Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And so the structure is sort of treating you as though you have an addiction. And it's very beneficial to think about sometimes psychological problems as an addiction. We feel always like we're responding to the external circumstances in an appropriate manner. Why would we respond in any other way than what feels appropriate, right? But when you realize that time and time and time again, your psychological state is creating repetitive patterns in your life, you have to understand that maybe that's an addiction. Maybe you're going through the same situations with different people, the same situations over and over again, because it's coming from you. And I had this breakthrough, I had this realization. Like I said, I keep these journals. I've got a shelf of about 50 journals in my room, in my bedroom, and they're all different colors, and they're full of, all my dreams and all my hopes and all of these obsessions that I've had with different people, and all the ways that other people have let me down, and all the ways that I've been screwed over by other people, and all the tears and pain and things I was trying to make relationships work. And when I looked at these journals through the lens of realizing that I might be the common denominator, I realized, look at all these journals, they're filled with the same story. They're filled with the same repetitive story of being hurt, of being a victim, etc., etc. And it's just different names that I'm writing in these journals about who's screwing me over, or who's cheating on me, or who's doing what. And what's the common denominator? It's me. And when you can come to that realization that you are the creator of your own reality, that you can actually change how you respond to external stimuli, external situations, in a way that changes the external situations, it gives you incredible power. It gives you incredible ownership over your energy. It gives you the ability to access peace and calm. And I don't know about you, but for me, peace and calm is the number one goal in life. Anytime I buy something, anytime I chase a relationship, anytime I desire anything, it's because I feel like peace is going to come through the acquisition of that thing, right? So whenever you want something, you boil it down. What do you want? You want peace, safety, relaxation, fulfillment. If you can break the attachment to the physical external world as thinking that that is the answer to my problems, getting this job is the answer to my problems, getting that new car is the answer to my problems, getting this lover is the answer to my problems. If you can break the attachment to the external world as being the solution to your problems, you can have spiritual liberation. You can actually achieve a state of peace. The reason why this works is because the external reality is the third dimension. It is temporal. It is not eternal. The third dimension, people leave, jobs, buildings crumble. Like, cars break down, okay? That is by rooting your desire and your assumption of happiness in the external physical reality, you are guaranteed to be in a state of agitation your entire life. And again, if you don't want to be in a state of agitation, which is usually why you're chasing all these third-dimensional things anyway, then you need to break your attachment to the third-dimensional reality and come inside and check in with yourself, with your soul, because your soul is eternal and all the answers are inside your soul. One of the main things I think that's wrong with humanity, this is a big statement. One of the main things that I think is wrong with humanity is the inability to have emotional maturity. And I don't just mean like acting like a kid. That's not what I mean. I mean emotional immaturity in the sense that we are raised by emotionally immature parents who don't know how to feel safe in their own bodies when other things are going around, and so they have agitation, and that agitation is externalized, and they blame other things for making them unhappy. They blame their kids and say, "You little shit. Look what you did. Look what you made me do. You're driving me crazy. You're causing all these problems in our household. You need to be quiet. You need to, etc." And then the kid internalizes, "Oh, I'm not allowed to develop or grow, so I have to shut down myself, my needs, and I don't know how to feel safe. I'm always in a constant state of agitation," and the cycle continues. The cycle perpetuates. Emotional maturity is the ability to hold space. It's the ability to be in your body, feel safe, and let chaos happen around you while knowing that inside, spiritually, you are unaffected. Any work that you do toward maintaining a coherent sense of self amidst chaos is going to not only benefit you and your life and bring you infinite blessings, but it's also going to radiate an energy of coherence out into your family life, into your community, into the world. Your ability to find a coherent sense of self with your higher self at all times, and to be safe and present with yourself and in your power, no matter what's going on around you, is the key to power. That's true power. So how do we do this in relationships and through the lens of attachment theory? Attachment theory is the idea that babies, in order to survive, must form a bond, a certain level of attachment to their caregiver. There's probably more to it than that, but that's the current explanation that is given. It also, perpetuates human culture. It's probably I think that attachment theory is hitting on some kind of long-term programming that we have in our society. Like I said, it's oftentimes passed on from parent to parent. If you have a parent who is emotionally immature, they will create a child who's emotionally immature. If you have a parent who is insecurely attached, they don't know how to have secure attachment, how can they teach it to their child, right? So oftentimes the parent will also create an environment where a child doesn't know how to be coherent with their higher self and have a secure attachment. So the idea is that they come from infancy and childhood, and it's something that is a very strong imprint. It's very difficult to even know that it's something you can change, but I really do feel like we're at a unique moment in time where our DNA is being upgraded by the sun. We are being blasted with light. We are being given so much information through videos like this, through TikTok, through our friends and family, through therapy, through everyone's desire to heal. And from that place, we are able to expand and break these generational curses, these generational chains that have plagued our families for hundreds of years. And so we're being given these really amazing opportunities, and you are uniquely positioned in time to take a look at this programming that you were put through as a child and actually break it. It's not easy to do, but it can be done, and when you do it, again, it changes your entire life. It makes you feel safe in your body at all times, and it creates a more positive world for your children and for everyone else in the world. So the ways that we have secure and insecure attachment, and I'm going to pull up a chart of attachment styles. You can always Google this. There's a couple different ways that people see this. They don't always agree about the names or the styles. of these attachment styles, but I'll pull up this one here. Okay, so the goal here is to have a secure attachment style. Let's just read that one first. Can trust fairly easily, is attuned to emotions, their own and others, can communicate upsets directly, and leads with cooperative and flexible behavior in relationships. So before we go on to the other ones, let's just think about ourselves and our patterns in our own lives. Again, realize the common denominator is you. So in your life, have you felt like a victim in your relationships? Have you felt like other people are always acting crazy and you just need to get space from all the insanity of relationships? Do you feel like people never give you enough love and you just need to like constantly chase people and it feels like no one's ever going to love you the way that you deserve? Do you feel like the whole amount of relationships is just too much work, you'd rather not do it? Do you feel afraid of rejection? Think about all of these feelings that you might have and think about how you're showing up in relationships, because it's really important, in order to know how your attachment style works, to take ownership over your own behavior and to notice the patterns in your life. So if you're watching this later, pause the video, grab a pen and paper, maybe write down some of the feelings that you have about what are the beliefs you have, the stories that you tell about how and why you are in relationships. Like, how come the same things happen? Or do you feel like there's different things that happen? Do you feel like you've made a big pivot at some point? How do you feel about setting boundaries? How do you feel when other people set boundaries with you, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, so if you're doing this work, it's really important that you learn how to really analyze how you show up in relationships so that when you take that ownership, you know what it's about and you know how to transform it. Okay, so we talked about secure attachment. Let's talk about the one that I have, which you all are pretty familiar with if you watch my content, is anxious avoidant. I'm sorry, not anxious avoidant, anxious preoccupied is another word for this. Has a sensitive nervous system, struggles to communicate needs directly, tends to act out when triggers, like makes partner deals. I don't do that, but it's okay if you do. So in the way that it shows up for me in anxious preoccupied is, and I think a lot of people resonate with this too. I know that in UNICULT other people were saying the same thing, which is where you have a partner and you start to get anxious that they might not like you anymore. You know, you start to get anxious that they're not texting you enough. You really feel the need to keep them involved in the relationship. You really feel the need to get texts from them and feel like they're engaged, and you feel a big fear of abandonment. You feel a big fear of being neglected or left out. And again, this all goes back to childhood, so how this shows up for you is going to be different. If you're still watching this and you have dismissive avoidant attachment style, congratulations, because people who have dismissive avoidant down here on the bottom left, they tend to not think that they have any problems in relationships. They tend to think that everybody else is crazy, that everybody else is overreacting, and they withdraw their emotions. They downplay the importance of relationships. They're usually very self-reliant, like a lone wolf. They can become more vulnerable when there is a big crisis. And we'll talk about these two styles. These are the two styles that I know the most about. Avoidant and fearful. This one sometimes shows up as either someone who is like going back and forth between anxious preoccupied and avoidant dismissive, where they'll be like, oh, I love you, no, leave me alone, oh, I love you, leave me alone, you know, and feeling like they need to be like one up on somebody. Or it can show up as this avoidant fearful, where they are really scared deep down and they have low self-esteem and high anxiety, but they're not, I don't really understand that one as much. And like I said, in literature, it changes all the time. So if you're not sure about where you stand in this scale, in this spectrum, you can do your own research. I'm going to specifically talk about this duality reality of the anxious preoccupied person and the avoidant, the dismissive avoidant. So for the anxious preoccupied person, like I said, you're probably afraid of abandonment, you're afraid of losing your partner, you're afraid of not keeping your partner's interests. Sometimes this will manifest as people sort of taking on the traits or the personality types as their partner in order to be more appealing to them. Sometimes this can manifest as just constantly being afraid, like that thing said, making their partners jealous, trying to get attention of other people to make sure the other person's engaged. It's a black hole of need inside the solar plexus of fear that you're never going to have enough love. Okay? And this is where it's very interesting, because the black hole of need inside the solar plexus also exists in the dismissive avoidant. The dismissive avoidant is someone who says, usually they pair up together. Usually they're in relationships together. Okay? That's where this whole thing is a fucking doozy. Because in a relationship where the dismissive avoidant is in a relationship with the preoccupied anxious attachment, the preoccupied anxious says, hey, I love you, and the other person says, wow, you're coming on too strong. And then the person says, oh, and they try to back off, but they really need the attention. You know, they're both feeling insecure. And so there's a lot of things that are happening with the dismissive avoidant. I fell in love with the dismissive avoidant a couple years ago, I don't know when, a year and a half ago. And it was the first time I'd ever been that close with someone who has this attachment style. It's a very sad attachment style. It's very hard for the people in their lives, because for them, they usually don't think that anything is wrong. They usually really ride on this idea of like, I know what's going on. I'm not the one that's overreacting. I'm not the one that's causing a big scene. So I don't know what's wrong with you. And then the people in their life are like totally gaslit and feel totally insecure all the time. Okay, when you look up these videos of people who have dismissive avoidant and like how to deal with them, the comment sections are full of people being like, don't even deal with these people. They're just gonna like destroy your self-confidence, okay? So if you have dismissive avoidant attachment style, the way that you can not be ruining other people's lives is to take ownership over your own attachment style and recognize that this feeling that there's nothing wrong with you might not be the case, okay? For dismissive avoidance, the goal is to create, okay, hang on. The way that it feels as a preoccupied, anxious attachment person in a relationship, like I said, is that there's this black hole of need in your solar plexus, that there's never gonna be enough love, and if they spend 5 minutes not texting you, 10 minutes not texting you, one day not texting you, there becomes a certain point in which it becomes agonizing. And for me, it even got to be so extreme that it felt like every hour that my boyfriend wasn't texting me was like he was knocking on my door, and I would open the door and he would spit in my face. Like that's how it felt like a personal attack, even though all that he was doing was not texting me. Because in my mind, in my solar plexus, in my energy body, I had a vortex of need that could never be satisfied, that could never be satiated. And I always thought that the answer was him, was my partner, was another person feeding me constantly reassurance so that I wouldn't sink down into despair. And that's not fair on me, that's not fair on my partners, that's not fair on my nervous system or my energy body. And there are ways that you can get to the point where you are stable, grounded, and secure without the attention of another person. And if that's a shock to you, then keep listening. If it's not a shock to you, that's okay too. I have some pretty interesting things to say. So for the dismissive avoidant, the truth is that inside, they are experiencing high levels of distress, just the same as the anxious avoidant. And that's why I think that this style of attachment is so sad, is because inside their body, they are still experiencing distress, and the way that they respond to that distress is to pull away, because they found in their childhood that coming closer was never going to get their needs met, that no one was going to be there for them. So they learned how to keep their feelings inside. This happens a lot when, like, let's say you leave a baby to cry it out. For the parent, it seems like a great idea. You leave the baby in the crib, they're crying for a little while, and then they stop crying. Problem solved. They learned how to self-soothe. That's the way that we think about it. That's not how it really is. When they put sensors on the baby and they regulate and they study the baby's nervous system and the baby's agitation, the baby is in the exact same amount of agitation as it was when it was crying. It just stopped crying because it knew that crying wasn't going to work to get their needs met. And so they sit alone with that feeling of abandonment, with that feeling of their needs not being met in silence. And that's the externalization of the adult reality of the dismissive avoidant. And so it's very sad because inside they are so lonely, they are so much in pain, but they know that they can never get their needs met from another person, and so they retreat and they just sit in their negative emotions all by themselves. The more that someone shows need for them, the more that they feel in danger of their own needs coming out, and so they push people away. If you have dismissive avoidant attachment style, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at setting boundaries. A preoccupied, anxious attachment style almost has the ability, not any ability to set boundaries. If you're nervous that your partner's going to leave you and you feel like you have to do everything in your power to keep them, are you going to set a boundary? Never. You're probably going to expose yourself to extremely toxic relationships. If that's the case, that's what was happening in my life. So it's obvious, perhaps, that the anxious preoccupied person who needs is going to be not able to set boundaries. But the other side of it is very interesting, is that the dismissive avoidant is also not good at setting boundaries. And the reason is that they're so afraid of that intimacy. They're so afraid of asking for their needs to be met. They're so afraid of acknowledging that they even have needs, because their entire persona is built on this fact of, I don't need anybody. So they've repressed their needs so deeply that they can't even set boundaries. So a lot of times people with dismissive avoidant attachment style will end up ghosting other people, or just leaving them in sort of chaotic situations, or blaming the other person and walking away and befuddling the other person. So both of these things are extremely toxic and not really good either way. I think what I want to really emphasize that people don't realize is that the same pain is happening in this duality. Both of these people are afraid of rejection, afraid of abandonment. Both of these people have needs that feel too big. Okay? This feels like a need that is spiraling out of control, except one person says, the only solution to my problem is you, and the other person says, the only solution to my problem is to get away from you. And then it creates this polarity, this duality. And if we're going to ascend the duality, and we're going to unify ourselves in harmonious relationships with ourselves and with the world, we have to expand our consciousness to unconditional love and do the shadow work. Here is the solution for both of these attachment styles. For both the dismissive and the anxious preoccupied, the goal is to create intimacy with yourself, first and foremost. And the way to do this is to sit with your emotions and feel them, and not act on your instinct to either cling to another person or push another person away. The goal is to sit in your emotions and feel them. And it's scary, because guess what? The whole pattern, the whole addiction, the whole spiral of clinging to another person or pushing them away is so that you don't have to sit in your feelings. Usually it feels like these feelings are so big that they will kill you. That's how heavy and difficult and painful these emotions are. That's why we put ourselves through these insane cycles and these toxic relationships, because we're trying to avoid feeling this feeling and taking responsibility for it within ourselves. But in order to create harmony, we have to have harmony within ourselves. You are rejecting the part of yourself that you are afraid is going to be rejected. You are the creator of your reality. So as you learn to sit with this part of yourself, this pain, and feel it. Know that it is a limited amount of feeling. It's going to feel like it's killing you. It's going to feel like it's overtaking you. It's going to feel like it's just destroying all of your guts and your insides. I got a stomach ulcer when I sat with these feelings. I was sick to my stomach. I was crying on the floor. I was screaming. I was making music about burning people's houses down. This is not a comfortable thing to sit with, okay? Especially if you have a really strong attachment to either avoiding these feelings one way or another, okay? The way to do this is to make sure you have proper support. You've got people around you. I'm not saying you need to isolate yourself entirely. I'm saying that you are the one who needs to feel these feelings instead of externalizing it and blaming other people. So make sure you have sufficient support. You've got good friends, good family who you can call, who will listen to you. Journal, take care of yourself. In SLAA, there's something called top lines, which is something that you do that is not your negative behavior. In this case, your negative behavior would be pushing people away, or it would be texting other people or clinging to them or calling them in. So you want to do contrary action to what you normally want to do, which is practice your addiction. The contrary action would be to do something healthy. So that can be doing yoga, that can be exercising, that can be journaling, that can be reading, that can be making art, that can be calling a friend. It can literally look like anything. For me, smoking cannabis is on my top lines. It's not on everybody's, obviously. But, and I'm going to go into a few more top lines about when you're in a relationship, but as you're feeling those feelings, you're probably going to want to take some time away from romantic relationships in order to really get to the bottom of them. So feeling those feelings, understanding when did this feeling come up? It's easy to say, my current boyfriend did this and I'm mad at him and he blah, 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 right? But then, like I said, you look at all the journals on your shelf and you say, I was mad at my last boyfriend for that too. I was mad at the boyfriend. I've been mad about that for my whole life, actually. And here's the key, you guys. Here's the key. When someone triggers you, 99% of the time, it is because they are highlighting pain that has always been inside of you. Rose Quartz the snake taught me that. Blew my mind, okay? When someone triggers you, it is because they are simply highlighting the pain that has always lived inside of you. This is the pain that you are constantly trying to repress. This is the pain that you are constantly trying to push yourself away from. And someone triggers you and then you're like, I don't want to look at that. I'm trying not to look at that. I'm trying to be free from this. Why would you do this to me? Why would you make me look at this pain? I don't want to look at this pain. I don't want this pain to exist. I reject this part of myself the way that my family rejected it, the way that my family taught me to reject this part of myself. The way that my family taught me, this part of myself is invalid. This part of myself isn't allowed. This part of myself doesn't fit into my parents' idea of comfort. This part of myself is too loud. This part of myself is too big. This part of myself is too needy. It needs to go away. It needs to die. It's not going to die. It's going to sit there in the corner and be wounded. So the way to feel it is that when you get triggered, you look at that wretched creature in the corner that you don't want to integrate. This is shadow work. And you say, ew, I hate that. What is that? Why do I hate it? And the more you sit with it, the more this evil monster just turns into a coat rack. And then behind the coat rack, you see a little wounded child who's crying, trying to get your attention. That's what it feels like to sit with those emotions. You got to tune into your repressed feelings. The pain is unbearable, and that is why, as a dismissive, you run from it. As a preoccupied, we all are running from it. As a dismissive, you're running from it by pushing people away. As a preoccupied anxious, you are running from it by trying to get other people to fill the need for you, to assure you that it's not real. But it's real, it's there. You have to look at these parts of yourself. This is shadow work. We feel it until it is known, and we integrate it with love. That all the things we hate about ourselves always comes down to a crying child throwing a temper tantrum. And we have told this little child their whole life, our parents started it, our society started it, that they are unworthy, that they are invalid, and that they don't deserve to be alive, and yet they're alive. And so how do we allow them to exist in a way that is healthy? How do we love them and translate their needs into healthy behaviors? If there's a part of you that's too loud, maybe you translate that into music. If there's a part of you that's too needy, maybe you translate that into art. Maybe you learn how to create a system of support for that part of yourself and realize, wow, this part of me that's too needy actually has a normal amount of needs that just never got met. And so it got really loud and really obnoxious because its needs weren't met. So how do we meet those needs? And maybe it takes a lot of work at first, but then that part of yourself gets regulated and integrated. For the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidant, the goal is to create intimacy with the self. As you feel these feelings, as you learn about who you really are, as you learn about yourself, you recognize that the other person isn't the solution. The other person isn't the problem. In most cases. Of course, if you're in a toxic relationship, that's something that you need to analyze. I want you to know that toxic relationships aren't necessarily bad. I've been in a lot of toxic relationships and they have taught me a lot. And the reason why they're not necessarily bad is because they are constantly triggering you. And what did I say earlier about triggers? Triggers are making you aware of all the ways that you are in pain, all the ways that you've always been in pain. So if you can learn to view your triggers as a blessing, if you can learn to be like, wow, I'm triggered. What does this have to say about me? Where is this coming from? At what point in time was I triggered as a child? Toxic relationships can kind of be a blessing. You will outgrow them if you start practicing this awareness. And as you start to practice this awareness, then you'll learn also how to set boundaries. For both of these sides, of the dismissive and the anxious, your feelings are a black hole that will never be escaped by running. And by running for the preoccupied anxious, running is running into, like, trying to merge yourself into someone else. That's running from your feelings. For the dismissive, running is running away. So for both of these styles, what are your top line behaviors in your relationship? The first is to tell your partner how you feel. For both sides, it's very difficult for us to tell each other how we feel. For the dismissive avoidant, it's hard to even know how they feel. So how can they tell someone else how they feel? And they're afraid of their feelings because their feelings are too big, because no one's ever met their needs. And they always know that their needs can never be solved by another person. That's their inherent core belief. So for the dismissive, it's very difficult, but it's very important that they learn how to tell the other person what they need. For the anxious preoccupied, it's important to tell the other person how you feel, and that can be scary because a lot of times the anxious avoidant has felt rejected because their needs are too big. In both cases, they feel like their needs are too big. So by voicing their needs and say, listen, this is how I feel, this is what I need, it doesn't mean your partner is responsible for meeting those needs, okay? But it's the first step. That's a top-line behavior. That's a contrary action because it's not easy to tell your partner how you feel. You have to remember, they are not the solution to your problem. Running away from them or coming towards them is not the solution to your problem. The solution to your problem is your own internal state, but that doesn't mean that you can't use the world around you to create the structure inside of you. And what I mean by that is that you can use your lovers and friends to communicate that you live in a safe world to yourself. I was saying earlier that the solar plexus is in a black hole state with both of these attachment styles, and it feels like it's coming from the space of not feeling safe, okay? So to break free of this and to feel peace and calm and powerful inside of you, you need to first of all learn how to feel safe. And in order to do that, you have to accept that it's a possibility that maybe you might be safe. Then you get to use the external world to say, I'm safe right now. I'm going to check that into my box. I'm going to take this experience, I'm going to put it into this new catalog of information that says the world is safe. My whole life has been spent thinking the world is unsafe because the world wasn't safe. But now I'm building up the tools to create the feeling of safety in my body. And the way I do that is by recognizing in certain moments when I am safe right now. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be safe. Reprogramming the brain, creating a little box, creating a little catalog, creating a database of instances where you really are safe, where the world really is safe, where you really can feel what it feels like to be safe. We're reprogramming our brains, we're rewriting our DNA, we're breaking generational curses, we're creating a safe world by recognizing how safety feels inside of us. You can depend on lovers and friends to help you create those instances of safety. Find people who are going to help you communicate safety when you're in distress, when you have big needs. Find people who can help you in those spaces. They are not the solution, know that, but they can help communicate to you that you can be safe. Create a place to experience that safety to land so that it doesn't go into a black hole. You have to build a little scaffolding to say, I am safe, to patch up that black hole, to start bringing back your energy, calling back your energy into your body, and opening up your chakras in a balanced way to give and receive love in a secure attachment. Another top line is sitting with your feelings and feeling them all the way. We talked about that. Notice how these old feelings are coming up, but they are just the pain that has always lived inside of you. Follow it back to your childhood. Validate your pain through your childhood. And watch and observe your behavior. You might be like, this all makes perfect sense. I don't want to be this way anymore. I'm so tired of cycling on this addiction or these toxic behaviors or this toxic stuff. Relax. Allow yourself to continue to do these behaviors when they happen. And just watch yourself, okay? As soon as the light of awareness comes into your perception, you will no longer be doing things the same way. Be gentle with yourself. You are breaking generational curses that have been going on in your family for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's gonna take a couple of cycles in order for you to gain enough awareness of observation to start behaving in different ways. Do what you can to do contrary action during your triggered states. It's okay if it's not perfect, but do what you can. You want to smash a glass, you want to throw, you want to yell, you want to text somebody, you want to run away from somebody. Do the opposite. Try to do the opposite thing when you're triggered. And it's going to be really hard at first, but you can use violet flame meditations. That's a big one. And remember that the goal is harmony inside yourself, true harmony inside yourself. Use top lines in both triggered and non-triggered spaces. Contrary action can be really helpful even if you're not triggered, but it's most powerful when you are triggered, which is why I say triggers are a blessing. And remember that by finding this harmony inside of yourself and by using the external reality to really create that harmony inside of yourself, you'll get to the point where setting boundaries is very easy. And of course, I'm not suggesting that you continue to be in any kind of violent or toxic relationships. Nobody wants that, obviously. I'm not saying go seek out toxic relationships. I was in a toxic relationship when I was learning a lot of this stuff. I was learning how to harmonize my internal state in a very extremely volatile and dangerous situation. And I stayed for much too long because I said, I'm still learning lessons. I'm still learning lessons. And the truth is I was afraid to really break the pattern and to set boundaries. And so the universe eventually did set boundaries for me because by finding harmony inside myself, it blasted away all discordant energy right out of my life. I didn't even have to set boundaries. But it's very helpful and very good if you can set boundaries. It's very empowering. Don't feel bad if you have to block people or take time for no contact. No contact is a huge tool when you're in these kinds of things to say, I need to take responsibility for my own emotions. So I need to not talk to you for a week, for a month, for 3 months, whatever, or ever again. Okay, so no contact is a huge tool that you can use. Try to be kind about it if you can. Try to communicate honestly and authentically about why you're doing it, and try not to make them feel bad for their behavior, because the more responsibility we can take for ourselves and our own behavior, the better it's going to be, and the more progress we can make. So that's my interpretation on that. Let me check in with the comments here. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. If you don't have a relationship, a lot of times that'll be, not having a relationship is a great space to really find yourself and really learn about who you are. You're not going to get triggered as much, which is a blessing in many ways. Nobody wants to be triggered. But you can also just really notice the patterns in your life, the beliefs that you have about, maybe you feel like you're always alone, or that you're never going to find someone, or things like that. How do you sit with those feelings, follow the same steps, sit with those feelings, integrate that fear, that rejected part of you that you feel like is always being rejected, realize that you're rejecting that part, and sit with that feeling and integrate that child self into you, and you'll watch your life transform, and you'll probably end up attracting a partner. Yeah, if you switch between secure and anxious avoidant, it's possible as you're learning how to get secure that you'll slip into your old way of being and then slip back into secure. And the more you can practice, the easier it becomes to have secure relationships. Secure relationships are the best. If you're used to toxic relationships or insecure relationships, a stable relationship sometimes is not, you're like, is this even love? Because it feels so secure. Like the high highs and the low lows, if you think that that's a relationship, you might be a little bored in a secure attachment. So you have to learn to value that and realize you don't really want that roller coaster. It's not really serving you in any way. The real benefit is when you heal those habits and raise healthy kids who go on to raise kids even better. And even if you're not someone with kids, the energy that you're cultivating is actually going out into the world, for sure. Yeah, if you have dismissive avoidant and you're with anxious preoccupied, then it's very common that you'll act out towards them and you'll blame them. You'll say, you're acting crazy, you need to be calmer, I'm leaving, this is all your fault. And it's so toxic. You have to learn how to take responsibility for the way that you're being triggered to run away. Everything feels totally valid, right? Like, if you're anxious and someone's not texting you, it feels valid to be like, but they're not texting me, they're not paying attention to me, I'm gonna go knock on their door, and like chase them, and that feels rational, it feels logical. If you're dismissive avoidant and someone's like knocking on your door, like, why aren't you texting me back? It feels rational to be like, you're crazy, get away from me, I don't want to be with you anymore, So it's this cycle of things that feel rational. But in reality, we have to understand that the desire to chase, the desire to push away is coming from this internal reality of not being secure. If you're secure and someone comes to your house knocking on your door saying, why aren't you texting me? You sit down with them and you say, I am not going to text you all the time. You need to be okay with that. But I'm here to listen to your feelings and maybe give you some resources for how to feel secure. Let's look up secure attachment. How can we get you to a secure attachment place too? One of the best ways, and this has helped me a lot, one of the best ways to figure out secure attachment is to be with someone who has secure attachment. And what I feel like secure attachment relationships are, they just don't have that polarity. They're not all charged up. It's like you text someone and they don't text you back and you freak out and you're like, oh my God, why aren't you texting me? And they're like, I'm sorry, I was sleeping. They're available, they're not overly available, they communicate. I can't text you right now because I'm gonna go hang out with my friends. I am going to text you when I get home at this time, helping you build that network of safety. For a dismissive, coming into a relationship with a secure person, they say, you're crazy, I'm going to go away from you. The secure person is not going to react. They're going to say, okay, that's fine, but it looks like you're pushing me away. So maybe we should talk about that and figure out how to get a more secure attachment, you know, and not attacking them, but being like, it's fine, but I'm pretty sure you don't want to be pushing me away right now. So I want you to know I'm here for you. It's a non-reactive place. It's a place where you're not acting volatile. It's a place where you're not all charged up. It's a place where you're not going up and down these roller coasters of emotions. And from that secure sense of self where you are empowered and you're not having this other person's behavior take you on a ride, then you can offer that stable ground for them to stand on. Whether or not they take the opportunity is not up to you, but you will be planting seeds in them, at least for later, to have these secure attachments. Yeah, I'm glad you all like this sermon. This is the kind of thing that has been very, very helpful for me, and it's taken a lot of research because nobody explains it quite like we all need to understand it. So I'm glad to give you this information. There's a lot of resources you can go into online. I would say YouTube is probably the best place to learn about attachment styles. Because you're going to get a lot of different perspectives and firsthand experience rather than the clinical version of things, which is just an academic circle jerk. So I think that's happening more and more in our healthcare, where the crowdsourced answers are sometimes a little bit more helpful than the academic ones, but both are extremely valid, and please, you know, maybe you can find an attachment therapist, you can join SLAA, you can do your own research, whatever suits you. Just be safe and good to one another. Be good to yourself. Thank you so much, everyone. Uni bless.